Kathmandu, Nepal, May 8, 2012. 3 more planes, and 3 days later, and I was landing in a painful pile of broken bones at the edge of the runway in Kathmandu, Nepal. There had been an unfortunate layover in Newark, New Jersey, when the next plane I had been planning to take had ended up getting delayed due to maintenance issues. I had to play the part of a baggage handler in Munich in order to catch my next flight, once again grateful of all of the training the facility had given me not only in infiltration, but also in foreign languages. I had nearly been caught in Delhi when a maintenance man had come back to the plane to do a last-minute check on tire pressure after I had already climbed up into my spot in the wheel well. Thankfully, by that point my once clean bomber jacket and clothes were now covered in the combined filth of airport maintenance areas and airliner wheel wells, which acted as a camouflage against my equally dirty surroundings. Thanks to my healing factor, the bones I had broken after dropping out of the wheel well of that last jet airliner only took a few agonizing minutes to set themselves and fused back together. Picking myself up from the ground, I double-checked to make sure that the contents of my backpack were relatively intact, having made sure to secure it to my chest before jumping to shield it with my own body. Not wanting to gather too much attention to myself by hanging around on the tarmac, I slung my backpack onto my back, and made my way over to the tall fence lining the runway. My adamantium-coated claws made a brief appearance, the galvanized steel wire parting like butter and allowing me to slip out into the city. Now, in the movie Doctor Strange, the aforementioned doctor had spent Lord knows how much time wandering around asking for directions to Kamar-Taj, and only lucking out when Baron Mordo happened to be padding by at the time. At the time he had been a penniless nobody, and had been completely unnoteworthy as anything other than one more unwashed, vagrant foreigner. I didn't have that same luxury. First of all, I was a rather attractive young woman, wandering around without an escort. Secondly, I only had a few more days before my mother contacted the Black Widow, and a certain director of S.H.I.E.L.D. became aware of my existence and started trying to track me down. Luckily, the bulky and worn nature of my clothing, and the filter mask that was still firmly seated on my lower face, would help prevent me from getting the wrong kind of attention as I navigated the city. While I would prefer to look my best when I met my potential teachers, such sentiments were secondary to my own continued safety. Reaching into the pocket of my jacket, I pulled out the cell phone I had stolen from the baggage handler all the way back in Quebec City, checking it for damage before slipping the battery back in. Turning it back on, I received the same error message that the phone was out of paid service, and the option to make a Wi-Fi call. Unlike Doctor Strange, I already knew that Kamar-Taj had a Wi-Fi connection, and that would be a key aspect to my search for the hidden temple. Unfortunately, the city of Kathmandu covered a little over 19 square miles of Kathmandu Valley, boasting a population of around 1.5 million people on average. Locating the temple based on its Wi-Fi connection would only really work once I was within a block or so of said temple. Squatting down in an empty corner on the side of a building, I took out one of my few remaining protein bars from a pouch on the side of my backpack, wanting to get a quick meal in before I started my hunt. I quickly tore my way through the protein bar, ignoring the way that getting repeatedly frozen at high altitudes had ruined its texture, before washing it down with a few mouthfuls of water from my now slightly beaten-up thermos. With my quick meal out of the way, I pulled my filter mask back up to cover my lower face, and settled the straps of my backpack back on my shoulders. A quick glance at the cell phone showed a lack of Wi-Fi signals, and I slipped it back into my coat pocket and zipped it closed before turning to make my way deeper into the city. Popping up the dirty fur collar of my coat to cover the lower half of my head, I wrapped my hands around the thick leather straps of my backpack as I blended in with the other people walking around. The morning air wasn't that cold here in the city, probably somewhere in the 60s Fahrenheit, but the chill of my most recent flight was still making itself known in my aching bones. It wasn't until late that evening that I finally caught a break, having noticed the distinctive green hooded robes of Baron Mordo as he made his own way through the crowded streets of the city. I pulled my filter mask down around my neck, taking care to cover my lower face with the collar of my cloak, as I started to follow behind the highly trained sorcerer. It took me a few minutes to narrow down his scent amongst all the others surrounding me, but once I had it memorized I was able to fall further back, no longer having to remain within line of sight to follow his trail. He ended up leading me through the city for over an hour before his trail ended at a set of beat-up wooden doors set into the side of a brick-walled building. Pulling out my cell phone, I searched for any nearby Wi-Fi signals, and was rewarded when it showed a strong signal named Kamar-Taj. They weren't even trying to disguise it. Nodding to myself, I took a deep breath to calm my nerves, before raising my hand up and giving a polite knock on the door of one of the most powerful people on this planet. My sharp hearing caught the faint sound of rustling cloth and footsteps approaching the door from the other side, and I quickly dropped the cell phone back into my pocket and zipped it closed just in time for the door to open in front of me. "Well, I wondered when you would decide to introduce yourself," Baron Mordo said, greeting me with a small grin. "After all, you did follow me around half the city today." I felt the blood rushing into my cheeks as I blushed, mentally kicking myself over the fact that he had noticed me tailing him in spite of all of my training and abilities. Then again, the teachers at the facility had never anticipated needing to teach me how to tail someone who had access to sorcery. Hi, I said, my mouth suddenly uncomfortably dry. "My name's Laura." "Hello, Laura," Mordo said, giving me a quick once-over, before looking around the narrow street. "My name is Master Mordo. Is there something you seek?" I had no doubt that the Ancient One had already foreseen my arrival, but I had no idea whether she had told him anything about me before I showed up here on their doorstep. As it was, the entire reason I had traveled to the far end of the globe was because learning sorcery would greatly improve my odds of not only surviving, but also helping as many people as I could. Honesty would be the best policy, regardless. "I have come in search of Kamar-Taj," I replied, "so that I might learn how to become a sorcerer." There was a moment of silence, as his dark eyes seemed to gaze into my soul. "You are very well informed, for one so young," Mordo commented, before stepping back to clear the doorway for me. "Come, we shall see what the Ancient One makes of your request." Giving the Master Sorcerer a slight bow, I took my first step into the temple, the clamor of the surrounding city disappearing the moment he closed the door behind us. Thick clouds of incense filled the air, the sunlight filtering in through the wooden latticework the only source of illumination as he led me down the dark wood-paneled hallway. Mordo led me into a larger room, with an elderly Asian man sitting behind a low table to my right. I gave another slight bow to Master Hammer, trying not to smirk when I remembered that Dr. Strange would mistake the man for the Ancient One several years from now. Two servants walked over to take my bag, and I quickly unzipped my coat when they reached for it as well. One of them gave the mask hanging around my neck a meaningful glance, and I pulled it up over my head, accepting their assistance with pulling my braided hair out of the tangle of straps. An empty teacup was placed into my hands by yet another person, and I made sure to thank them as a pale-skinned bald woman stepped over to me with a teapot to fill my cup. My nostrils flared, taking in her scent, as I came face to face with the Ancient One for the first time. Every movement of her body was smooth, controlled, precise, and I had no doubt that in spite of my current level of skill and the advantages granted to me with my mutation that I was about as dangerous to her as a butterfly would be to a tiger. "Thank you, Ancient One," I said, bowing to her over my teacup. "You are most welcome," she said, giving me a small smile, before dismissing both Master Hammer and Baron Mordo, leaving us alone in the room. "So tell me, why are you here, Laura Kinney?" "Yeah, I should have seen that coming. There are several reasons I am here," I replied, taking a sip of tea to help clear the dust in my throat. "I don't know how much you already know about me, but I was created by the Weapon X program to be a living weapon. Part of that process was to program me to react to a certain chemical, a trigger scent, which would make me kill whoever had been treated with it, regardless of my wishes." I took a small, shuddering breath, as the Ancient One gave me a supportive nod. "The people that did this to me are now dead," I continued. "My mother gave me a mission to kill them, not knowing that they had already hit her with the trigger scent. Thankfully, one of the computers had been left unlocked, and I knew to put a mask onto that I wouldn't kill my mom when I came out to get her." The Ancient One stepped away to give me a moment to collect myself, taking the time to make her own cup of tea while I finished mine off. "My mother is a scientist, a geneticist," I explained. "She was part of a program attempting to clone the Wolverine, but the sample they had of his DNA was incomplete. My mother was able to combine the fragmented sample with one of her own eggs, and in doing so she was no longer a scientist, but part of the experiment herself. I'm not a clone, not in the traditional sense. I have a mother, who did what she could to help raise me as best she could, to try to show me how to be something more than a letter and a number." Feeling the weight of her gaze, I looked up to see the Ancient One studying me over the brim of her cup. "Even if you decide against allowing me to learn sorcery, I beg you please, help me get rid of the programming that nearly made me take the life of my own mother," I begged her, cradling my now empty teacup against my chest. There was a long moment of silence as the Ancient One continued to study me, her steady hands lowering her teacup to the table with a soft thump of stoneware on wood. I was just starting to nervously fidget under the weight of her gaze, picking at the rough glaze of my own teacup with one of my thumbnails, when I spotted the corners of her lips twitch up into a small grin. I'm impressed, the Ancient One confessed, walking back around the table to stand in front of me, just out of arm's reach. You didn't even mention all the lives you are hoping to save with the knowledge you brought with you when you were reincarnated. She knew. Oh, yeah, of course she knew. Ah, yeah, I muttered, feeling as if the world had just fallen out from under my feet. I thought that might have been a bit heavy-handed to start off with that. So, you do know what is going to happen, right? The Ancient One nodded with a faint grimace. To a point. But, of course, you already knew that. Yeah, I sighed. I just wish, well, this world will be a darker place without you. And that, right there, is why I shall teach you, the Ancient One said, giving me a small, sad smile. You have the wisdom to know that there are some things that cannot be changed, and the will to change that which you can. With that said, she gently took the teacup from my hands, placing it down next to hers on the table. I felt my hands starting to shake when I realized exactly what she had just said, and I ended up collapsing into a chair I was sure hadn't been there a moment ago when my knees gave out on me. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes, the anxiety of the past several days piling up on me all at once. No matter how old I had been in my past life, in the here and now I was barely 14 years old, and the medication the facility had been giving me to control my hormones had already started to wear off. I was vaguely aware of the Ancient One coming over to kneel at my side, her warm hand rubbing a circle against me upper back as I tried in vain to pull myself together. Between her calm presence, and the knowledge that I was going to learn sorcery, I eventually calmed down enough for her to help me clean myself up a bit, and lead me on a small tour of the temple that ended when we reached a small room that had the rest of my meager belongings sitting at the foot of a wooden framed bed. There is a bathroom just down the hall where you can get cleaned up, the Ancient One offered to me. A set of novice robes in your size will be set aside for you in the morning, which you will be expected to wear while you are a student in these halls. You need not worry about the trigger scent while here, so the mask will not be needed in the time it takes for us to rid you of that issue. Thank you, I said, taking half a step forward before stopping myself. Is there something else you need? The Ancient One asked, giving me a soft, knowing smile. Hug? I asked, nervously spreading my arms out for her. If you must, she told me, wrapping her own arms around my slight frame, her distinct aroma of incense, tea, and honey filling my head. Little known fact, the Ancient One gives really good hugs. To Sarah Kinney. From Laura Kinney. Subject, Hi Mom. Hi Mom. I just wanted to let you know that I'm still safe, and I've found some people that will help me with my self-control, so that I no longer have to worry about getting triggered. That's not the only thing I'm going to be learning while I am here, though, so we probably won't be able to see each other face to face for a while. They downloaded my own memories into my sister's. I'm glad you're there for them right now, cause a lot of those memories are rather unpleasant. Please give them my love for me. Love ya. Laura. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.